The original thought that a merger of 7 smaller companies to create one large company and take that powerhouse to the top of the pottery world seems logical. It didn't work.
They soon had troubles because the managers of the plants just couldn't see eye to eye. You know, they were used to running their own plant, and they didn't like somebody in Monmouth telling somebody in Clinton, Missouri how to run their plant. And the plant in Fort Dodge burnt down 6 months later, Fort Dodge, Iowa. So they just gradually, that plus money, they were, at that time when they formed, they were the world's largest pottery because of the 7 plants.
After the fire, the Fort Dodge plant, or plant number 7, was never rebuilt and was the first to be sold off in 1910. Second to go was plant number 6, the former Clinton Stoneware. Bad times hit many potteries in 1910, and plant number 6 closed its doors that year. It sold 8 years later to Wilkes Iron Works. By 1911, 5 years into the grand merger, Western Stoneware was already in receivership and continued to shrink. 2 more plants would close in the next 6 years. Plant number 3, the original Macomb Stoneware, was destroyed by fire in 1913. Instead of rebuilding, the management used the $50,000 insurance money to modernize and repair the other plants. The site eventually sold in 1920. 3 years later, the former D. Culbertson Stoneware stopped production. Despite many attempts by the Culbertson family to purchase back the plant in exchange for their Western Stoneware stock, the plant was eventually dismantled. It was sold to trustees for the city of Whitehall in 1923. Now, with 2 plants in Monmouth and 1 in Macomb, Western Stoneware continued in this form until the Great Depression. The original Monmouth Pottery Company, or Plant Number 1, became the company office and retail sales outlet. Plant Number 1 may be best known for its gardens. The formal garden, which was planted in 1928, was patterned after an English nobleman's estate. The sunken rock garden was planted 2 years later.
My first impressions of Western Stoneware were when my grandparents would come up from southern Illinois to visit, and before even coming in the house, they'd say, "We're here, we're going to the pottery." And at that time, it would have been plant number 1, had the sunken gardens, which had fish ponds and rose bushes, and it was just a beautiful garden. And then also they had many bins of ware that was stacked up. And my grandparents would bring up a list of, from their neighbors, of pieces that they wanted picked up. So that was their, once they would come to Monmouth, that was their first stop, was at the pottery.
The garden boasted over 50,000 visitors one season. Its popularity was so large that the company produced a 33-page booklet entitled How to Make an Outdoor Living Room. The Great Depression caused production to cease at Plant Number 1 in 1930. Although the main factory building was torn down for salvage 4 years later, offices remained at the site until 1954, when the building was sold to the city of Monmouth. The old Macomb Pottery Company, first renamed Plant Number 4, continued to run on a limited basis. After the sale of Macomb Stoneware, the plant was renamed Plant Number 3 and would operate when it had orders and close in bad times. With pottery being out of vogue in the 1950s, management decided to sell the plant in 1956 to Casons Incorporated. Western Stoneware consolidated its operations into one plant, Plant Number 2, the original Weir Pottery. Although first dedicated to artware and garden items, in 1956 Plant Number 2 became the center of all pottery production for Western Stoneware.
When I happened to be in 4th grade, we had a tour of the pottery. And I can recall coming into the plant, and it reminded me of Charles Dickens and some of the stories that I had read of a very dark and dingy place. I remember that there were tables set up with incandescent lights about seemed like every 50 foot. And underneath these lights sat women at tables, and they were hand decorating dishes. And I thought, boy, I hope I don't ever have to work in that plant. And fortunately, I've ended up spending well over 30 years here and enjoyed it very much.